My fiancé cheated with a married man and treated me like I was disposable, so I sent the proof to his wife, and what I discovered about their secret lives destroyed everything. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. 3 years of my life. 3 years of believing Rebecca Langford loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. 3 years of thinking our wedding in 8 months would be the beginning of something beautiful. The truth hit me like a freight train on a random Tuesday when I came home early from the animation studio. Rebecca wasn't expecting me. Neither was David Chen, her married boss at the marketing firm, when I walked into our bedroom and found them together. The shock on their faces lasted maybe 2 seconds before Rebecca's expression shifted to something I'd never seen before: cold calculation. "Tyler, this isn't what it looks like," she said, pulling the sheet around herself while David scrambled for his clothes, but it was exactly what it looked like, and somehow, in that moment of absolute devastation, I knew this wasn't the first time. That night changed everything. Not just because of the betrayal, but because of how Rebecca handled it afterward. The woman I thought I knew disappeared completely, replaced by someone who treated our 3-year relationship like an inconvenient business transaction that needed to be dissolved quickly and quietly. "We both know this wasn't working anyway," she said the next morning over coffee, as if she hadn't just destroyed our entire future. "You're always buried in your animations, Tyler. When was the last time you took me somewhere nice? When did you last post about us on social media?" David appreciates me in ways you never could. David appreciated her. David, who was married with 2 young kids. David, who Rebecca had been secretly seeing for 6 months while planning our wedding. David, who had no idea that his perfect double life was about to crumble because he'd underestimated exactly how methodical an animator could be when properly motivated. The first week after catching them was a blur of moving out, sleeping on my friend Matt's couch, and trying to process how completely I'd been played. Rebecca kept our shared apartment, kept the ring, kept everything we'd built together. She acted like I was the inconvenience, the obstacle preventing her from living her authentic life with David. "You're being dramatic, Tyler," she told me when I tried to talk about our relationship, our future, the plans we'd made. "Adults move on. Maybe you should try it." That's when I realized Rebecca hadn't just cheated on me. She'd been systematically erasing me from her life for months, probably years. Looking back, I could see the pattern: how she'd stopped including me in her social media posts, how she'd become secretive about work events, how she'd started treating me like a roommate who helped with rent, rather than a partner she loved. But Rebecca made one crucial mistake. She assumed that because I was quiet and focused on my work, I was also weak and would disappear quietly. She had no idea that animation requires incredible attention to detail, patience, and the ability to see patterns others miss. Skills that would prove very useful in the coming weeks. Matt Callahan had been my college roommate and remained my closest friend, despite our different career paths. While I created animated worlds, Matt worked as a private investigator specializing in insurance fraud. When I showed up at his door with a duffel bag and a broken heart, he took one look at me and cleared out his guest room without asking questions. "Take all the time you need, ma'am," Matt said, handing me a beer. "But when you're ready to talk about what happened, I'm here." I told him everything: the affair, Rebecca's coldness, how she'd made me feel like I was the problem in our relationship. Matt listened without judgment, but I could see the wheels turning in his investigator's mind. "Tyler, what Rebecca did to you emotionally is terrible," Matt said carefully, "but if she's been planning this for months while letting you pay for wedding expenses, while letting you support her financially, that might be more than just cheating. That might be fraud." The word hung in the air between us: fraud. I'd never thought of it that way, but Matt was right. For the past year, I'd been paying for our shared expenses while Rebecca claimed her marketing job barely covered her student loans. I'd paid for her car repairs, her shopping trips, even her contributions to our wedding fund. All while she was secretly building a relationship with her married boss. "I'm not saying you should pursue it legally," Matt continued, "but you deserve to know exactly what happened, how long this was going on, how much money you spent supporting someone who was already checked out of the relationship. You deserve the truth, the truth." Such a simple concept that had become so complicated in my relationship with Rebecca. She's rewritten our entire history to make me the villain, the neglectful partner who drove her into David's arms. But what if the real story was different? What if there was evidence of just how calculated and methodical her betrayal had been? That's when I decided to find out exactly who Rebecca Langford really was. My first attempt at getting answers was embarrassingly naive. I called Rebecca's sister Emma, thinking family loyalty might compel her to tell me something useful about Rebecca's behavior in recent months. Emma had always been friendly to me, had seemed genuinely excited about our upcoming wedding. "Tyler, I think you should just let this go," Emma said, when I explained that I was trying to understand when Rebecca's feelings changed. "Rebecca says you two grew apart naturally. These things happen. Maybe it's better if you both move on quietly." Grew apart naturally. That was Rebecca's official narrative, apparently. No mention of David, no acknowledgement of the affair, just a mutual, peaceful ending to a relationship that had run its course. I hung up feeling worse than before, realizing that Rebecca had already rewritten history for everyone in her life. Next, I tried reaching out to Rebecca's coworkers at the marketing firm, people I'd met at company parties over the years. Surely someone would be willing to talk about whether they'd noticed changes in Rebecca's behavior or seen anything suspicious with David. But every conversation followed the same pattern: awkward hesitation, then careful deflection. "Office relationships are complicated, Tyler. I don't really pay attention to that kind of thing. Maybe you should talk to Rebecca directly." By the end of the week, I realized that Rebecca's version of events had already spread through her entire social circle. I was the ex-fiancé who couldn't handle the end of a relationship gracefully. She was the independent woman who'd outgrown a partnership that no longer served her. Clean, simple, completely false. The failure stung, but it taught me something important. Rebecca hadn't just planned her exit from our relationship, she's managed the narrative. She was controlling the story everyone else heard, making sure she looked reasonable while I looked desperate and clinging. This wasn't amateur hour cheating. This was a professionally executed relationship assassination. Matt found me that evening staring at my laptop, scrolling through Rebecca's social media posts from the past year. "Any luck with the family and friends approach?" he asked. "She's already got everyone convinced that we just grew apart." I said. No one wants to talk about David. No one saw anything suspicious. Either Rebecca is incredibly good at hiding affairs, or they're all lying to protect her, Matt finished. Which means you need a different approach, less asking people to betray confidences, more finding evidence they can't deny evidence. Matt was right. Instead of relying on people to tell me the truth, I needed to find proof of what had actually happened. Fortunately, Rebecca had made another mistake. In a rush to rewrite our relationship history, she'd forgotten that we'd shared everything for 3 years, including digital access to accounts she probably didn't even remember. Our shared Google Photos account was still active, automatically backing up pictures from both our phones. Rebecca had been using it for years to store work presentations and personal photos. She'd probably forgotten I still had access, assuming I'd be too heartbroken to do anything productive with the information. She was wrong. 3 days of methodical searching through thousands of photos revealed a timeline that shattered Rebecca's growing apart naturally narrative. Photos of her and David at restaurants during what she'd told me were working late nights, screenshots of their text conversations that she'd apparently photographed to share with friends, pictures of expensive gifts I'd never seen her wear, taken in locations I'd never been to with her. The timeline was devastating. The affair had started 8 months ago, just 2 weeks after David's promotion to marketing director. The expensive dinners, weekend trips, shopping sprees, all funded by David while I was paying Rebecca's living expenses. The woman who claimed she couldn't afford to contribute more to our wedding fund had been living a double life that probably cost more than my annual salary. But the most damaging evidence was in the screenshots. Rebecca and David's text conversations revealed not just an affair, but a systematic plan to end my relationship with Rebecca while keeping David's marriage intact. They'd strategized about how to make me look bad, how to time the breakup, how to ensure David's wife never found out about their relationship. Tyler's so buried in his work, he probably won't even notice when I start pulling away. One message from Rebecca to David, and if he does notice, I'll just say he's being clingy. Men hate being called clingy. Another exchange showed them laughing about my contributions to our wedding fund. He'd still putting money into our joint account for the wedding. Rebecca had written, should I feel guilty about using it for our weekend trips? David's response, consider it compensation for having to pretend to love him for a few more months. The cruelty was breathtaking. Not just the affair, but the calculated emotional manipulation. Rebecca hadn't fallen out of love with me, she'd been systematically devaluing me while extracting every possible benefit from our relationship. And David hadn't just pursued a married woman, he'd helped plan the psychological destruction of someone who's never done anything to harm him. I spent the evening organizing the evidence into a comprehensive timeline, photos, screenshots, financial records showing my payments to Rebecca during the same period she was receiving expensive gifts from David, a complete picture of fraud that went far beyond simple infidelity. Matt reviewed everything with the professional eye of someone who'd built fraud cases for insurance companies. Tyler, this isn't just cheating, he said finally. This is financial fraud, emotional abuse, and conspiracy to commit both. Rebecca and David planned this whole thing together, including the part where you'd be too devastated to fight back. The evidence was overwhelming, but I still needed corroboration from someone who could verify the details, someone inside Rebecca's world who might be willing to confirm what the photos and messages revealed. That's when I remembered Lisa Park, David's executive assistant. I'd met Lisa at several company events over the years, and she'd always seemed genuinely nice. More importantly, she was in a position to observe David's behavior patterns, his schedule, his personal calls and meetings. Getting Lisa to talk required a more sophisticated approach than my earlier failed attempts with Rebecca's friends and family. Instead of asking her to betray confidences, I presented her with some of the evidence I'd already gathered and asked her to help me understand the timeline. Lisa, I'm not trying to cause trouble for anyone, I explained when I met her for coffee near her office, but I found some things that don't make sense, and I'm hoping you can help me understand what really happened. I showed her a few of the photos from the shared account, nothing too personal. Just images of Rebecca and David at restaurants during business hours. These are dated during times when Rebecca told me David was in meetings or traveling for work. I'm wondering if there's been some kind of misunderstanding about their working relationship. Lisa studied the photos for a long moment, her expression troubled. Tyler, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, she said finally, but those weren't business meetings. David blocked out his calendar for personal time during those dates. He told me he was dealing with a family emergency and didn't want to be interrupted. Family emergencies. David had been using fake emergencies to create time for his affair with Rebecca. How often did these family emergencies happen? I asked. 2 or 3 times a week for the past several months. Lisa admitted. I kept asking if there was anything I could do to help, but David said it was too personal to discuss. I started wondering if someone in his family was seriously ill. Lisa's confirmation transformed my evidence from suspicious photos into documented patterns of deception. David hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been systematically lying to his assistant, his colleagues, and presumably his wife about where he was spending his time. There's something else, Lisa said reluctantly. Last month, David's wife called the office looking for him during one of these family emergencies. She seemed confused when I told her he was dealing with a family crisis. She said she'd just talked to his parents, and everyone was fine. David's wife was already suspicious. She'd noticed the same patterns I had, the same mysterious absences and vague explanations. The difference was that she didn't have access to the photos and messages that proved exactly where David was spending his time. That realization hit me like a physical blow. David's wife, I didn't even know her name, was living the same lie I'd been living. The same confusion, the same growing suspicion that something was wrong, the same gaslighting when she tried to ask questions, except she had 2 young children depending on her, and a husband who was not only cheating, but actively planning to keep her in the dark indefinitely. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Rebecca's betrayal of me, it was about David's betrayal of his entire family, and Rebecca's willing participation in destroying lives she's never even met. That evening, I sat in Matt's guest room, staring at my laptop screen, feeling the weight of what I'd discovered. I had enough evidence to prove Rebecca had systematically defrauded me emotionally and financially. I had proof that David had been lying to his employer, his assistant, and his wife for months. I had documentation of their conspiracy to end my relationship while preserving David's marriage through continued deception. The question was, what was I supposed to do with it? You could just walk away, Matt said when I explained my dilemma. You've got closure. You know the truth about what happened. Maybe that's enough. But was it enough? Rebecca was continuing to tell everyone that our relationship had ended naturally, that I was being dramatic about a mutual breakup. David was going home to his wife every night, probably planning to keep the affair going indefinitely while she struggled with her growing suspicions and self-doubt. And somewhere in this equation were two children who deserved to have at least one parent who was honest with them. What would you do? I asked Matt. Honestly, I'd probably send the evidence to David's wife, Matt said. She's got the right to know what's happening in her marriage. She's got kids to think about, financial decisions to make. The longer David keeps lying to her, the harder it's going to be for her to protect herself and her children. He was right. This wasn't about revenge against Rebecca and David anymore. This was about giving an innocent person the information she needed to make informed decisions about her life. It took me 2 days to find David's wife online. Her name was Sarah Chen, and her social media profiles painted a picture of a devoted mother struggling to balance work and family, while her husband was frequently absent for mysterious work emergencies and family crises. Her most recent posts were heartbreaking. Photos of her handling school events alone, apologizing to friends for David's absence from social gatherings, making jokes about being a single married mom that weren't really jokes at all. She was living the same isolation I'd experienced, the same growing confusion about why her partner seemed to be pulling away. The difference was that Sarah didn't know she was competing with another woman for her husband's attention. She was blaming herself for the distance in her marriage, wondering what she'd done wrong, how she could be a better wife to someone who was systematically betraying her. I spent hours crafting the message I would send her. Nothing vindictive or cruel, just a straightforward explanation of what I'd discovered, with the evidence attached. I wanted to give her the information she needed without making her feel like a pawn in someone else's revenge scheme. Sarah, you don't know me, but I think you deserve to know something about your husband's recent absences from home. I'm not trying to cause trouble for your family, but I believe you have the right to make informed decisions about your marriage and your children's welfare. I attached the photos, the screenshots, the timeline I'd created showing the overlap between David's family emergencies and his dates with Rebecca. Everything organized and documented, presented as factually as possible. Before I could lose my nerve, I sent the message. The response came faster than I expected. Sarah called me within 2 hours, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and relief. Tyler, I can't thank you enough for sending this, she said. I've been going crazy for months thinking I was imagining things. Thinking I was being paranoid. David kept telling me I was being insecure and jealous when I asked about his absences. The gaslighting hadn't just been part of David's strategy with Rebecca and me. He'd been systematically making his wife doubt her own perceptions, her own sanity, while he carried on an affair that she was absolutely right to be suspicious about. What are you going to do? I asked. I'm taking the kids to my sister's house tonight, Sarah said. I need time to think, and I need to talk to a lawyer. David's been putting our family at risk in ways I never imagined. The lies, the deception. How could I ever trust him again? She paused, and I could hear her trying to compose herself. Tyler, I'm so sorry about what happened to you. What Rebecca did was cruel, and David helped her do it. They're both terrible people. And you deserve so much better. That conversation changed everything for me. For weeks, I'd been focused on Rebecca's betrayal, on how she's treated me like I was disposable. But hearing Sarah's voice, understanding the full scope of what David and Rebecca had done together, made me realize this was bigger than just one broken engagement. They hadn't just ended my relationship, they'd been systematically lying to everyone in their lives. Rebecca had been defrauding me while I supported her financially. David had been gaslighting his wife while endangering his children's stability. Together, they'd created a conspiracy of deception that had harmed multiple innocent people. The next morning, Sarah sent me a text. David came home last night to an empty house and divorce papers on the kitchen table. His lawyer called this morning, saying he wants to work things out quietly without involving the evidence you provided. Apparently he's very concerned about his professional reputation. Professional reputation. That phrase stuck with me as I thought about the broader implications of what David and Rebecca had done. David was a marketing director at a respected firm, responsible for managing clients' public images and brand reputations. Rebecca was a social media manager, paid to help companies maintain their online presence and credibility. Both of them had built careers around trust, authenticity, and professional integrity, yet they'd spent months engaged in elaborate deceptions that demonstrated exactly the opposite qualities. Their professional lives were built on foundations of lie that went far beyond their personal relationship. That's when I realized there was one more person who deserved to know the truth: their employer. The marketing firm where David and Rebecca worked prided itself on family values and ethical business practices. Their website featured testimonials from clients about the company's integrity and trustworthiness. David, as marketing director, was literally the face of that reputation. But more importantly, David had been using company time and resources for his affair. The family emergencies that had blocked out his calendar, the personal meetings during business hours, the lies to his assistant about where he was spending his time, all of that had happened on company time while he was being paid to manage their clients' reputations. I spent the weekend organizing a comprehensive report for the firm's human resources department. Not a vindictive attack, but a professional presentation of facts with supporting documentation, timestamps showing when David had claimed to be handling family emergencies while actually meeting Rebecca. Photos proving they were using company events and business trips for personal relationship development, evidence of the systematic deception that had characterized their behavior for months. The report made clear that this wasn't about their personal relationship choices, but about their professional integrity and the company's liability. David had been lying to his assistant, his colleagues, and his clients about his availability and priorities. Rebecca had been using her company's social media access to coordinate their personal meetings and relationship activities. Both of them had violated the professional trust that was essential to their jobs and their company's reputation. I delivered the report to her on Monday morning, along with copies of all the supporting evidence. The receptionist assured me that it would be reviewed by the appropriate personnel within 24 hours. By Wednesday, both David and Rebecca were no longer employed by the marketing firm. The news spread quickly through their professional network. In the world of marketing and social media management, reputation is everything. Companies hire these professionals specifically because they trust them to maintain integrity and discretion in handling sensitive client information. David and Rebecca had demonstrated that they were willing to engage in elaborate deceptions, systematic lying, and the manipulation of professional resources for personal gain. Those weren't character flaws that existed only in their personal lives. They were fundamental integrity issues that made them liabilities in any professional environment that required trust. Within 2 weeks, both of them were struggling to find new employment in their field. The marketing community is smaller than most people realize, and word travels fast about professionals who violate trust and ethical boundaries. Rebecca called me 3 weeks after losing her job. Her voice desperate in a way I'd never heard before. "Tyler, you've destroyed my entire life," she said. "I can't find work anywhere. No one will hire me. My friends won't talk to me. I'm probably going to have to move back in with my parents." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy I'd once had for Rebecca when she was upset. Then I remembered the screenshots of her messages to David, laughing about using my wedding fund money for their weekend trips, strategizing about how to make me look bad during our breakup. "Rebecca, I didn't destroy your life," I said calmly. "I just gave people accurate information about your choices and behavior. What they did with that information was up to them, but you didn't have to send everything to Sarah," Rebecca protested. "You didn't have to involve our employers. You could have just walked away, just like she'd expected me to do when she was caught cheating. Just like she'd planned for me to do when she systematically defrauded me while planning our wedding. Just disappear quietly while she and David continued their affair and their lies indefinitely. Rebecca, you spent months lying to me while I supported you financially." I said, "You and David planned the entire thing together, including the part where you'd make me look like the bad guy for being hurt about it. You treated me like I was disposable." Remember, there was a long silence. Finally, Rebecca spoke, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said. "I never meant to hurt so many people." "Yes, you did," I replied. "Every choice you made was designed to hurt me, while protecting yourself and David. You just didn't expect there to be consequences for anyone else." That was the last conversation I ever had with Rebecca Langford. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment bought with the money I'd been saving for our wedding, when Matt brought me a beer and an update on Rebecca and David's situation. Rebecca moved back to her hometown in Ohio. Matt reported, she's working retail while trying to rebuild her social media career. David's divorce was finalized last month. Sarah got the house, primary custody, and a significant alimony settlement. "How are Sarah and the kids doing?" I asked. "Better than expected." Actually, Sarah told me she's started dating again, and the kids are in therapy to help them process the divorce. She said discovering the truth about David was devastating at first, but ultimately liberating. She's not questioning her own sanity anymore. That was what mattered most to me. Sarah had been living the same gaslighting nightmare I'd experienced, but with children, depending on her ability to make rational decisions about their family's future. Giving her the truth had allowed her to protect herself and her kids from continued manipulation and deception. "What about you?" Matt asked. "Any regrets about how you handled things?" I thought about that question for a long time. Had I been vindictive? Had I gone too far in exposing Rebecca and David's deceptions? "I don't think so," I said finally. "I gave people truthful information that they had a right to know. Sarah deserved to know about her husband's affair and lies. Their employer deserved to know about their professional integrity issues. I didn't exaggerate anything or make false accusations. I just documented what actually happened. The truth was that Rebecca and David had created the consequences for their own choices. They'd built their affair on a foundation of systematic lies and deceptions that harmed multiple innocent people. When those lies were exposed, the natural result was that people stopped trusting them personally and professionally. I hadn't destroyed their lives, I'd simply removed the elaborate fiction that was protecting them from accountability. A year later, I was in a much better place emotionally and professionally. The animation studio had promoted me to senior animator. Recognizing work I'd thrown myself into during the months after my breakup with Rebecca, I'd started dating again, more cautiously, but with a much clearer sense of what healthy relationships look like. Most importantly, I'd learned to trust my own perceptions again. Rebecca's systematic gaslighting had made me doubt my ability to accurately assess situations and relationships. Discovering the truth about her deceptions and seeing how my evidence had helped other people escape similar manipulation had restored my confidence in my own judgment. The experience had taught me that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it's painful for everyone involved. Rebecca and David's lies had been harming multiple people, including children, who deserved better from the adults responsible for their welfare. Exposing those lies hadn't been revenge, it had been a form of protection for everyone who was being deceived. Sarah sent me a Christmas card that year, along with a photo of her and her kids at their new house. "Tyler, I wanted you to know that we're doing really well." She wrote, "The kids are thriving, and I'm happier than I've been in years. Thank you for giving me the information I needed to build a better life for my family. I hope you're finding happiness too." I was finding happiness. Not the naive happiness I'd felt when I believed Rebecca loved me for who I was, but a more mature contentment based on honesty, self-respect, and relationships built on actual trust rather than convenient deceptions. Rebecca had taught me that I was disposable to someone who saw relationships as transactions designed to benefit themselves. But Sarah, Matt, and the friends I'd made since then had shown me that healthy relationships were based on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's welfare. The woman I'd been planning to marry had never actually existed. Rebecca Langford had been playing a character designed to extract maximum benefit from our relationship while minimizing her own investment and commitment. When that character was no longer useful to her, she's discarded it and tried to make me disappear quietly. Instead, I'd chosen to document the truth and share it with people who had the right to know what was really happening in their lives. The consequences that followed weren't my revenge against Rebecca and David, they were the natural result of people making informed decisions based on accurate information about the character and integrity of people they'd been trusting. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear quietly when someone treats you as disposable. Sometimes justice looks like giving people the truth they need to protect themselves and their families from continued deception. And sometimes the best revenge is living authentically, while the people who tried to manipulate you face the consequences of their own choices. I never saw Rebecca or David again, but I heard they both eventually found new jobs in different fields, far from the marketing world where their reputations had been permanently damaged. I hope they've learned something from the experience, but honestly, their personal growth wasn't my responsibility anymore. My responsibility was to build a life based on honesty, respect, and genuine connection with people who valued those qualities as much as I did. It was a much better life than the one I'd been planning with someone who saw me as disposable. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.